Welcome to Economics Made Easy. Today, I'm going to share a perspective that only economists would typically have. Discrimination always comes at a cost. Most people think that discriminating against others is simply bullying them, and being discriminated against means being mistreated, seeing discrimination as a one-way action. The first person to challenge this view was Gary Bakke from the University of Chicago. In his doctoral thesis, The Economics of Discrimination, he argued that those who discriminate against others also pay a price. His teacher was none other than Milton Friedman, whom we've introduced before. When Friedman first saw this thesis, he wasn't happy about it, because as a Jew, he had experienced discrimination himself. The idea that those who discriminate also suffer could have seemed like defending discriminators. However, Friedman quickly changed his mind, and today we'll explore this viewpoint. There are two fundamental origins of discrimination. 1. Preference. For example, I enjoy Wang Fei's music, so I spend money on her albums instead of buying records from other artists. Many people prefer watching white dancers perform the Four Little Swans, so African Americans don't get the opportunity to perform it. 2. Asymmetry of information. Imagine you're in a room and suddenly a tiger jumps out. What do? You run, because tigers are dangerous. If I told you, hold on, this tiger is different, it doesn't eat people, what would you say? You'd probably say, how do I know? I'll just run anyway. I might say, that's discrimination. You're judging this particular tiger based on your general impression of tigers. You should take some time to understand this tiger. But you'd likely respond, I don't have time. The risk is too high. This shows us a key principle. People often make generalizations, but this is unavoidable because the cost of gathering information is high. Generalizations are bound to be wrong at times, but considering the cost, they are often worth it. People often make sweeping generalizations about groups. Northeasterners, Southerners, Beijingers, Shanghainese, Americans, Japanese, etc. This is a form of discrimination because it's based on generalizations due to asymmetric information, and it's more convenient. However, we shouldn't ignore that when you generalize, you'll pay a price. For example, when Jack Ma was looking for investors early in his career, if you were an investor who didn't like his appearance and didn't invest, you might regret it now. Discriminating wrongly can cost you dearly. Following this line of thought, we realize that the more serious the consequences of discrimination, the more likely we are to try to reduce it. If the consequences of discrimination aren't serious, we might discriminate casually. For example, I grew up in Guangdong, and back then, people in Guangdong would categorize everyone into 3 groups. 1. Guangdong people, 2. Northerners, whom we called Baifan Gren. 3. People from outside China, whom we called foreigners. Back then, we'd often say bad things about Northerners. Did it matter? Not really, because we rarely interacted with them. Discriminating didn't come with much cost, and it gave us some sense of self-satisfaction. Then I moved to the U.S., where my class had Chinese, Americans, whites, blacks, and Indians. When it came time to form study groups, if I stuck to the habit of discriminating against anyone who wasn't from Guangdong and refused to work with them, I wouldn't be able to finish my assignments. This illustrates a key point. When you don't face significant costs, you'll indulge your discriminatory habits. When the costs are high, you'll restrain those habits. There are 2 places, New York, a bustling metropolis, and a remote town in Texas. Which place has more serious discrimination? Obviously, the remote town, because there, discriminating against others doesn't result in much loss. In a place like New York, if you discriminate, you will suffer huge losses. Sometimes, people don't naturally grow open-minded. Their lack of discrimination comes from the pressures of competition. Discrimination levels vary across industries. For example, If I'm a gay person with many tattoos, a nose ring, and a small braid, where would I face more pressure? In a state-owned enterprise or a private company? Clearly, in a private company, the pressure would be much less. In competitive private enterprises, people care more about my work abilities than my personal preferences in other areas. So, places with more intense market competition tend to be more open-minded and inclusive. The more competitive a place is, the more it becomes a haven for minorities. If you belong to a minority, whether in religious beliefs, hygiene habits, sexual orientation, or political views, encountering an employer who's only motivated by profit becomes your blessing. Discrimination always comes at a cost. There are two origins of discrimination: human preferences and asymmetry of information. Regardless of the origin, the higher the cost of discrimination, the more people will strive to reduce unnecessary discrimination. Do you think people less discriminatory behavior is more severe when electing a president or when choosing a partner? Feel free to leave me a comment, and I'll see you next time. This is Economics Made Easy, where we give you authentic economic thinking.